You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational podcast with your hosts Adam Jackson and Patrick Wheelton. Enjoy the show.
And welcome back to the Beltway Wars Invitational podcast with your wonderful hosts Patrick Wheelton and Adam Jackson. We're going to go over our Week 10 matchups of this week. A lot of interesting scores, a lot of interesting records after Week 10. A lot of people at 5-5, 4-6 that are really itching to make that last playoff spot as we're coming up on it, I think 4 weeks from now. So yeah, Pat, do you have any observations from Week 10?
You always ask me that, and I never have a prepared answer. It's like I should expect it from now on.
Yeah, I know. We've been doing this, for however long.
Not really. Just that I stand by my criticism from a couple weeks ago when the Ravens released that ridiculous ad about being home and, we're coming home and we do what we want at home. Bullshit. They lost another game at home that they should have fucking won. So shove it, Ravens social media and PR team. Like, God damn, this is the same problem that's been plaguing them for multiple seasons now. I mean, there's plenty of stats floating around. I mean, we saw this in game after game last year. Us and I saw it when we went up to New York against the Giants last year. It keeps happening. These blown fourth quarter leads, these blown double-digit leads. It's getting ridiculous. So that's what I thought of this week.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Don't worry, I just played a little drop there just to explain your displeasure there. I'm ready to go today, baby boys and baby girls. Before we get started with the matchups, I did want to give a shout-out to one of our loyal listeners that's not even in this league, and he listens to the show every single week. That would be Colby. Colby listens to the show every single week, so just wanted to give him a shout out on the show this week as being one of our loyal listeners that's not even in the league, so none of you have an excuse not to listen to the full show week in and week out.
Is that really true?
Yeah. I mean, I'm taking his word for it, and we were both hammered, so I don't really know, but we're going to take his word for it. He seems sincere.
All right.
So
thanks, Colby.
So let's go over to our first matchup. Let's get into it here. Talking about the resurgence here, that would be Jake here, 149.76 in the day. Started, I think it was like really below 500. One of the lower teams in the Beltway Wars Invitational has really come back to his own and almost is 500 now. So we're going to give him a round of applause for that. They're coming back. Just looking at his team here for this week, Dak Prescott, really the resurgence. Talk about a resurgent Jake team. Dak Prescott, over the last 4 weeks since he's been traded, of course, from me, 24, 28, 28, and 37 points over the last 4 weeks. Chris McCaffrey has a nice day here, 16 for 95. Doesn't get in the end zone, ends his touchdown streak, but still ends up with 17 points on the afternoon. Rashid White, still 20 carries, 51 yards, but does get in the end zone through the air against Tennessee. Chris Olave, 6 for 9, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Mike Evans, who was also another trade piece that I traded away. Mike Evans, 6 for 10, 143 yards, and a touchdown. And then Najee Harris quietly starting to come back into the fold. 16 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown against Green Bay with a solid 17 points. Looking at Jake's squad here, my biggest thing is Chris Olave. Does he benefit more now that Jameis Winston looks like he's going to start next week than Derek Carr?
It's possible. I mean, these are both guys that are going to throw the ball deep and not, both guys that are comfortable throwing the ball downfield. I don't know. I don't know that it's going to be that big of an upgrade for Olave. I think, and it'll be hard to tell whether this will be an improvement for him or whether this will be his average moving forward, because this is kind of how everybody expected that he would play to this point. He's been a little bit of a disappointment, at least in a few weeks. He's been as low as like a point. He has a 7 in there. He's got a 9 in there. He's got an 8 in there. So I think people were expecting more out of him. I don't know that the QB change makes a huge difference, but I do think it's realistic to think that Olave will be more like he was this week than he has been in previous weeks.
Yeah, I think I'm a little higher on Chris Olave now if they do stick with the quarterback change. That remains to be seen, especially if Derek Carr is healthy to play. Just looking at it, remains in concussion protocol. So we do know that when you're in concussion protocol, you are out for 1 week at least. They are on bye this week, so it does give him a little extra time to come back from that injury. So it'll be interesting to see just how if Jameis does play. I mean, Jameis is one of the players. I think he's the only player in the NFL to throw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in one season, the 30 for 30. So he definitely does throw the ball. He definitely takes chances, and I think that is a huge upgrade for Chris Olave. Just really pushing the ball down the field, making some questionable choices that could really benefit Olave and his talent. But just look at his bench here. Nothing really to mention here. We do bring him up all the time. Zach Moss, only 1 carry here. I think that experiment is now over with Jonathan Taylor being fully back. So it will be interesting to see what Jake does with that, if he's even rosterable. With
I
only
think I
one.
said that at the end of last week, right? I think that was the last thing we talked about, and we both agreed that, I think he's probably droppable, and he proved it.
Yeah, last 4 weeks, 50% snap count, 39, 21, and 16. So he is a change of pace back. That is it. He's not even the third down back anymore. It was a good ride for Zach Moss, I would say, but I think that his fantasy relevancy is over for 2023. A couple other things. Brandon Cooks, 9 for 10, 173 yards. Not something to completely write off, but, I mean, that game was just an absolute blowout. I don't know how many times you're going to see Brandon Cooks get 10 targets. The most targets he got before then was 7. And the high yards in any of his games before last game was 49. So this is probably a little more of an outlier, but definitely something interesting to keep in mind for Jake. Jake now goes to 4-6 on the season, really making a play to get in that playoff conversation. And good work for Jake for making some savvy moves and some good plays in starting players to bring him back to where he is today.
Yeah, and I want to say that Jake is now won 3 straight games, right?
Yep.
That happens to coincide, I believe, with the trade that he made with you.
Yep.
And you just kind of look at that and you say, okay, Prescott, 37 fantasy points. Mike Evans, another acquisition in that trade, 23 fantasy points. Very quietly, or not so quietly, the 1-6 has turned into 4-6. And week 8, he scored 141 points. Week 9, 127. Week 10, he leads the league with 149. And if you look at this roster, the trade is one aspect of this, but the other part is a little bit luck and a little bit, like if you look at the fantasy season, like you're leading an orchestra. Jake's the conductor of an orchestra here, and he's hoping that his players that are taking the spotlight on any given week are going to, even if they go through streaks, this is going to make sense, I promise.
No, I hope you didn't. I hope you weren't hoping for like an orchestra drop, because that would have been like a layup, but I wouldn't have had it.
We need to pre-plan.
I could do a sad trombone.
Here
you go.
No, well, Jake has been the opposite.
He's a happy trombone.
He's a happy trombone, and it's because as players go through streaks this year for him, you mentioned, the streak that Zach Moss went on prior to the Jonathan Taylor comeback this year. So just as Zach Moss has started to fade, he has had a guy like Najee Harris really pick it up. Najee Harris was a guy that was almost left for dead, a guy that everyone full well expected before the season started. Certainly I did, was one of the doubters that said Jaylen Warren would take over the starting job at least by week 10. We thought maybe even earlier. So the fact that Harris has put together 3 out of 4 games, his last 4, going over 14 fantasy points, means that he is a weekly RB2 until proven otherwise.
Yep.
He's got some really good matchups down the stretch. Tough next week at Cleveland, but he's got Arizona, New England, Indianapolis still on the schedule. So Jake is having these players that are coming and going. He's had now Rachaad White, as you mentioned, become a top 12 running back in fantasy right now. He's braved some tough matchups, and he also has some good matchups the rest of the way. So I feel like the way Jake has managed his team really is the reason for this comeback from 1-6 to 4-6, and kind of on the brink of playoffs.
The only thing I will say is that I feel like Najee Harris' ceiling is a little low. I mean, just looking at the snap count here, it's only 51%. So Jaylen Warren is going to get his run going forward. So might want to temper a little bit of expectations, but when he's been on the field, he's been producing. 4.3 yards per carry last week, 5.1 yards per carry this week. So like to see that for Jake. But let's go over to Dustin here. Dustin now goes to 5-5. Really nice week, 136.58. But does get defeated in week 10. Defeated. So let's just go over to his quarterbacks here, because that's always been a kind of thing here. He does pick the right one, goes with Sam Howell over Deshaun Watson against the vaunted Ravens defense. But Sam Howell, quiet. I think he's very quiet. The number 3 overall ranked quarterback. Wow, he would have had that. You would have been really rich if you bet on that earlier in the year. With a solid 24 points. Jahmyr Gibbs finally finds his role here, even with Dane Montgomery back. 14 carries, 77 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day for Jonathan Gibbs in their shootout win against the Chargers. Jonathan Taylor, 23 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Consistently now getting over, this was actually his first game that he hit over 23 carries. So he's back to full strength. Better days ahead for him, but does get a solid 14 points. Jamar Chase, 5 for 6, 124 yards, and a touchdown in their loss against Houston. He's back to form. I know that we were a little bit worried at the beginning of the year, but he's strung off a couple of great games. Now is the wide receiver 6 on the season. But now we get to some of the bad stuff, right? Marquise Brown, I know we were talking about Kyler Murray coming back and how that was going to affect him. Did not work out week 1 with the Kyler Murray experience. Only 4 targets on the day, 1 catch, 28 yards. In a close one against Atlanta, so definitely should have had more usage there. Taysom Hill, who had a great week last week with 18 points. Little usage in this one, 1 carry for 6 yards, 2 for 4, 17 yards, only 3 points. That's kind of the story with Taysom Hill, ups and downs. Nuclear or not at all is basically his thing. And I don't know if it's questionable just because of looking at his bye week situation, but starts Justice Hill, only 2 carries, 7 yards. Probably the third back on that team now for Baltimore with Keaton Mitchell and Gus Edwards on the field. But then, the unsung hero, Jason Myers here, gets 22 points. Anything over 20 for your kicker is just amazing. So, not really much to go on with Dustin here. 5-5 does score a lot of points here on the week. It's just a little bit concerning here, with the Gabe Davis, Marquise Brown, but he does have Jalen Waddle and Puka Nacua waiting in the wings coming off their buys.
Yeah, this is a frustrating loss for Dustin. I can see him rolling his eyes and throwing his hands in the air and just letting out a
Do you think that he shotgunned a beer after this one or no?
If he did, he should film it for the next time that he's the lowest.
Oh, just have one in the chamber just in case.
Yeah, they aren't timestamped. You have no idea for sure. But in all seriousness, I don't think Dustin will be a team that is going to be anywhere near the bottom anytime soon, because with the players that he's got coming back from bye, the talent that I still believe throughout this entire season, I keep saying it. I think this is one of the better teams in terms of how it's built. And just an unfortunate week, putting up a lot of points and getting a loss with a bunch of players on bye. You mentioned Nacua, Waddle, Henderson. Those are 3 starters right there that were on bye this week. And you mentioned it, the production that he got in their place just wasn't good enough. Those wide receiver 2 and 3 and flex spots, combining for 11 points or something, is just not going to get the job done. It's hard to hide that on a fantasy roster on any given week. But Dustin tried pretty hard to do so. I mean, Sam Howell, it is amazing what he's been able to do. And, you thought the Commanders were going to be a run-first team. They brought in Eric Bieniemy, the former Kansas City Chiefs coordinator that was, of course, responsible for all of those passing attacks with Mahomes and Kelsey and Tyreek Hill and all these greats in Kansas City. While they've gone to more of a run-first approach, I think in some cases, Washington's done the opposite.
Right.
They have been throwing the ball, and Sam Howell has now thrown more than 40 times in every game since week 4, except for one.
Yep.
So you're talking about 6 or 7 games that he's gone 40 or 50 passes in. So with that kind of volume, he's bound to have good numbers, even when he's not very efficient on the day.
Right.
And hey, I mean, kudos to Dustin for sticking with him. We talked about it on the podcast, I think, last week about the next 3 weeks. Maybe you have to start Howell.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a question now. Last week we thought, well, maybe, but now it's over.
My thing with Howell is, okay, let's look a little bit in the future here. Starting week 15, so 14 is on bye. That's when playoffs start, mind you. He has the Rams, who, used to be better in the past, then the Jets and 49ers. So a really kind of tough playoff schedule for Sam Howell. The volume's definitely going to be there, but man, this just seems like one of those things where the rookie's going to come out in one of these playoff games if he so happens to get into the playoffs where, you're going to see an 8-point game, a 7-point game, just against one of these elite defenses. So just something to watch out for. Maybe Deshaun Watson can figure it out, be a fill-in. He definitely looked better this week against the Ravens after a slow start. So maybe he's starting to get better with it. But like you said, a very, very talented team. I mean, you have Gibbs, you have Taylor. We didn't even mention Kyrie Williams, probably going to come back. He's your flex, 100%. You got Waddle, Puka, all these players coming back, and then just a lot of talent. And probably, I would say Dustin's probably better than his record should show at 5-5. And we both loved his team after the draft, so nothing new there in terms of the admiration that we have for Dustin's team. So
by the way, just to add to that fact, so I think Dustin, if you actually looked at all of these point totals, he's kind of middle of the pack, it seems, maybe in the league. But one thing I did want to note before I forget is just everybody from top to bottom in this league right now. This is the closest kind of point distribution I've seen in any year that we've had. I mean, the top team I think is at 12. Is it 12? Yeah, 1271. The lowest team is like 1,038. So like less than 200 points separate.
That's like 2 bad weeks
last, so.
between flipping.
I mean, usually I feel like it's maybe we'll see as the season goes on, but I just feel like everyone's it's been pretty close.
Yeah,
from point scoring.
The parity in this league has hit an all-time high, I would say, and any team in this league can beat any team at any time. We definitely have, and we've definitely cultured this. Me and Pat picking people that know what they're talking about in fantasy football, trying to make the most competitive league out there. So, kudos to you guys for paying attention and keeping it going. Even if your records don't show success. So,
anybody can beat anybody at any time, except for nobody can beat you at any time. So that is the one exception to the rule.
I didn't say it. So I didn't bring it up. So just so everyone knows there. But let's go over to our next matchup here. Of course, it's you with 140 against Charlie here. Really kind of an impressive day just all around. I'm trying to look for a drop while I talk. Let's see. Let's give you the victory one. So you now go to 7-3 on the season. Really kind of starting to distance yourself from the middle of the pack here when you were kind of caught up in there. You go with bye week fill-in Baker Mayfield. Does completely fine for you. 18 points. Very respectable. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Aaron Jones, apparently they didn't learn that Aaron Jones is the best player on the football field as he only gets 13 carries in this one for 35 yards. Little bit of involvement in the passing attack. Still not the usage there. I don't know what's going on. If you ever listen to Matthew Berry, he just screams free Aaron Jones at every show, so it's kind of funny that they're not using him. Saquon Barkley, same kind of thing, but this is more game script. 13 carries, 66 yards, in that really just tough game to watch against Dallas. Could get nothing doing. But on the other side of it, you had CeeDee Lamb, 1 carry for 14 yards and a touchdown, 14 targets. He continues to be a target monster in that passing attack for Dallas, 151 yards and a touchdown. He is on fire right now. He is blazing to the number 1 spot in fantasy football for wide receivers. Calvin Ridley here, a little disappointing, but he's kind of had an up and down season this year. 2 for 3, 20 yards. Metcalf finally starting to help you out here as one of your only trade acquisition this year. 7 for 12, 98 yards. You like to see the 12 targets, him being much involved. TJ Hockenson, which I think he has to be a top 5 underappreciated.
Try one.
What?
Oh.
No, I was going to say top 5
I
underappreciated draft pick for where he was picked. 11 for 15, 134 yards and a touchdown. I think you are saved by Josh Dobbs getting there when he did. He is feeding him the ball like it's Kirk Cousins out there, probably a little better. So you like to see that. And then, this is something I want to talk about. San Francisco's defense for some reason out there. I was looking to pick them up, but then I forgot. So bad on me. 20 points on the day. Probably, I mean, you have the Browns and San Fran, so you can just play the matchups there and assuredly get over 10 points each and every week for you. So 140, great score. You're really you're in second place. Your bench looks great here. Jaylen Warren, we were just talking about Najee Harris, but 15 carries, 101 yards. I mean, usable flex probably. Deontay Foreman until Khalil Herbert really comes back. I don't even know if he was back in this one. But 21 carries, still usable here. So you got a lot of nice pieces here, and you got Tua coming back. So your weakness from this week is going to be a strength in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, Nico Collins missed this one.
I can't see that.
He is also going to be back.
Just so everyone,
really,
just so everyone knows, I emailed Sleeper saying, "Can you update your desktop app because it's awful?" And they literally wrote back to me, "We don't really care about the desktop app. We just care about the phone app." I was like, "All right, well, okay." So I can't see IR people, but Pat will be sure to remind me. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. I mean, the phone app is phenomenal. We were talking with somebody about this over the weekend, Adam, you and I, and someone who said they're still using ESPN, and we said, man, Sleeper is the way to go for sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like ESPN still has not updated their UI.
No.
Is that the UI?
Yes, that's
UX?
correct. I like it, UI.
UI,
Yep.
right. So anyway, happy, really happy, great week. Didn't get it from Jones and Barkley, but was able to get it elsewhere from guys like Metcalf, who you asked me last week if I'm worried. Would love a touchdown, but 7 for 12, I cannot complain about that. Nor can I complain with CeeDee Lamb, who becomes the first player in NFL history to catch 10 targets and go over 150 yards 3 times in a row.
Wow.
Big numbers from CeeDee Lamb.
Look at you with the
there
stats.
with the Cowboys.
Look at you.
I try.
Yeah.
I try. The interesting thing here for me was TJ Hockenson, kind of an interesting storyline, was questionable all week. Sunday morning reports across Twitter that say Hockenson will be limited to critical situations only, which sent me, believe it or not, to just glance at the waiver wire, the free agency, nobody really doing anything for me there. So I said, okay, we'll keep Hockenson in there. I think it's probably the right move. And he ends up playing his lowest snap percentage on the year, but has his highest fantasy output. His most receptions with 11, his most targets with 15, 24.9 fantasy points. So really happy. Hope that he's healthy moving forward, but he certainly seemed healthy in this one. James Conner returned, maybe getting worked into the offense. 16 carries, though.
Yeah.
Kind of a nice to see a little bit with as much as that run game has struggled.
If that's getting worked in, then he might have 30 carries next week if he's fully back.
I hope so. And, part of this, right, Kyler and Conner coming back at the same time, they won this game against Atlanta. So it just kind of gives you hope for things to come when they're both kind of back in the groove of things, back to kind of the week-to-week gameplay. So, yeah, pretty happy. Browns and Niners, I agree. I'll be playing the matchups as long as I can afford to roster 2 tight ends. I think it's starting to be the end of the serious buy situations. 13 is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think I can make it through there. And yeah, great to see Foreman and Warren putting up points on the bench. I have 2 of the 3 Bears running backs, and I will just kind of hold them to see who is able to, be a spot starter if needed whenever the time comes. So pretty happy with 140.
Just going back to your TJ Hawkinson thing, I mean, as a old wise fantasy football analyst said, start your studs. If they're on the field, start them, which you did, and it paid off for you this week. So good on you this week. Now going to 7-3, number 2 in the Beltway Wars Invitational through 10 weeks. But let's go over to Charlie here. Kind of a disappointing. We was trying to get back to 500. Loses this one. Now 111.66. Now goes to 4-6 on the season. Starts Geno Smith here, who was a late add, I think. I don't think he was part of the waiver. He might have been. But scores 24 points, back to kind of fold. 47 attempts, which is kind of shocking to see. Very close game in that one, so I don't know how much you're going to see that. But with the running game being as it is there in Seattle, you might see that a little bit more. Maybe we wrote off Geno Smith a little too early, but you'd like to see 24 points there. Derrick Henry, now I'm like, you don't like this, right? 43% snap count, only gets 11 carries, 2.8 yards per carry. You got to ride with them, but I would definitely be a little concerned, and I would sound the alarm for Derrick Henry. Drop. So, yeah, I would definitely be a little bit concerned just with that output, and Tampa Bay defense too. I think they're in the middle of the pack against running backs. James Cook, he looked great last night. I don't know if you saw that play when he you did. I guess you didn't watch it all, but he got a 20-yard run and was stripped from behind, and literally the ball bounced and then flipped back to him, and he ran for another 40 yards. It was kind of wild, but does get 12 carries, 109 yards. Doesn't get in the end zone, which has kind of been a staple of him all year. Only has 1 rushing touchdown on the day, 1 receiving. So you're hoping that you get a little more touches out of him, but he did look explosive last night. Deebo Samuel in his return, 3 for carries, 29 yards and a touchdown, 4 for 430, doing Deebo Samuel things, doing it anyway and always there in San Francisco. Keenan Allen here, 11 for 14, 175 yards and a touchdown. Again, in that shootout against Detroit, 35 points over the weekend. Jordan Addison, kind of a slow day, 4 for 7, 69 yards. Jonnu Smith, I mean, you can't no, Einstein can figure out that Falcons offense, who's going to be featured, what week, when, why, how. So good luck to Charlie with that. And Jacoby Myers, who we've talked about a lot on this podcast, 2 for 2, 21 yards. Changing quarterback, I mean, last week he had 12 points, so maybe not, but probably a little more inconsistent going forward.
Yeah, 100% on Jacoby Myers. Definitely worried about him playing the rest of the season like he has this first part. Their offense seems to be getting more focused on the run game since Antonio Pierce took over.
Yep.
There is a very clear emphasis on Josh Jacobs in that offense playing a lead role. You can see that reflected in Jacoby Myers' sort of receptions in recent weeks. They're way down in these last couple games, just 2 in this week, 5 last week, and 1 the week before. So really taking a major hit. Speaking about receivers taking a major hit, one thing that we should be cognizant of is the fact that Jordan Addison, while he's been excellent for a rookie so far, he's been one of the better rookies in the NFL this season. They will have number 1, Justin Jefferson, coming back, returning from injury likely this coming week. So now with Dobbs, the quarterback, it'll be interesting to see. When it was Cousins, he was sustaining 2 wide receivers. Addison had a good start to the year. We'll see if Dobbs can do that. It's less likely, still possible, but we will see on Jordan Addison. And then the last player I wanted to highlight about a change in situation here is James Cook, who you talked about,
Yeah.
the Bills, of course, today firing offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. So we'll see what the offensive coordinator shakeup in Buffalo. I don't know who's going to be calling
I think it's
plays.
the quarterback
but
coach. I don't know his name, though.
Quarterback coach, that doesn't give me a whole lot of hope that he's going to change how the running backs give them more usage. But definitely something to note. So it'll be interesting to see how Charlie does. He's right on that cusp at 4-6.
Yeah.
He needs a couple of those changes in circumstance to benefit him. I don't know if a couple of these guys start making a downturn. I'm not sure that he'll be able to hang on to playoff contention.
Yeah, I mean, so he's not starting Gino next week because he has Patrick Mahomes. You're starting him every single day. You know, you're looking at Michael Mayer, you know, kind of like a iffy tight end, but he's probably better than Jonnu Smith right now. You just can't pick the weeks that Jonnu Smith's going to be used and when he's not. It's so frustrating that Arthur Smith there in Atlanta doesn't use his best players, and then you're like, okay, well, he loves Jonnu Smith. He only gets 2 targets on the day for 1 yard. It's all over the place. You can't really trust anyone in that Falcons offense. Maybe Bijan is really the only one. Tyler Algier, probably you can trust him too, just because of the amount of carries he gets. But yeah, it's just very hard to trust. It reminds me of like the Belichick running back fiascos that he used to have back in the day. You remember what was the guy's name? Something Gray that ran for 200 yards and he never got a carry the next after that. So it's kind of like that.
Cyrus, was his name Cyrus Gray? Was that it?
I have no idea.
Or am I making that out of nowhere?
But kudos to whoever can put in the comments who that player was. Don't say it out loud. I'm trying to get some interaction here for this podcast. But, you know, Charlie goes to 4-6. He's on the cusp of, you know, being in the playoffs. He's definitely in that mix. Definitely has talent here, but, you know, with Derrick Henry, the shakeup with James Cook, what's that offense going to look like? Keenan Allen has some little bit of health issues. It's day-to-day, so that's good. Jordan Addison now changing, and just the inconsistency with Atlanta. I think there are some things to worry about with this team.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to – I kind of feel like somehow Keenan Allen, at least to me, whether it's because he's on the Chargers or whatnot, he seems to be flying under the radar to some degree. I don't know why.
It's because he plays for the Chargers.
But he's number 3 in wide receiver, and he's had one game under 10 fantasy points.
Yep.
So, like, double digits every week but one. Yes, please. A little bit tough. Some tough matchups, including the Ravens in a couple weeks, the rest of the way for Keenan Allen, but matchup-proof guy, and if he keeps doing what he's been doing, I mean, hey, what a steal for when you got him in the draft.
Yeah, when was he drafted? That's the 4th round. So yeah, I mean, he's playing like a second rounder. I mean,
at least, yeah.
At least, so okay, that's a good question. Who would you rather have going forward, Cooper Kupp or Keenan Allen? Assuming Stafford's healthy. Let's just say that.
Assuming he's healthy?
Stafford's healthy. Yeah, and Cooper, I guess.
Probably. Boy, they're close.
Okay.
It's right there.
So that's where it is. Okay.
Flip a coin.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where it is.
All right, awesome. All right, so let's go to our next matchup here. That is going to be Alex with his second win of the season. Congratulations to Alex. I'm trying to find a thing while I look for a drop here. Number 2 on the season, 2-8 now, 133.82 points. Looking at his starting roster here. It goes with Jared Goff over Trevor Lawrence, which really proved to be the smart choice here. 21 points compared to 2 points from Trevor Lawrence. Bijan Robinson finally getting that usage. We were talking about Atlanta, how frustrating they are. This is his first game with over 20 carries. It is week 10, so he finally is getting involved as he should be. Josh Jacobs here, 27 carries. They're really feeding him there in Las Vegas now with the new coaching staff. Has 116 yards, but does lose a fumble. Kind of a lower day for him, but 11 points, you'll take it. George Pickens continues to struggle, but he did do better than Deontay Johnson in this week. 3 for 4, 45 yards. Curtis Samuel, he starts here. 2 for 6, 6 yards. Looking at his roster, I don't know. Still starting to think he might Well, well, I guess you can't because it worked out. But starting the 2 tight ends here might in the flex spot might be something that he wants to do. Noah Brown here, who's going to be a very popular waiver pickup in a lot of other leagues, 7 for 8, 172 yards. Was kind of an afterthought with the Cowboys, and he's really starting to show that he's an NFL caliber starting receiver with 20 points on the day. George Kittle, 3 for 4, 116, and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson gets in the end zone through the air with 14 points. So very solid day for Alex. Looking up and down his roster here, had some people on bye, Swift, Elliott, and the Eagles defense. And T. Higgins was hurt. So was able to put up this point total with some injured players and some players on bye. So going on Alex for maybe playing a little bit of dagger to the heart of Tom's playoff chances.
Yeah, I think Alex may relish that role moving forward as a spoiler for playoff teams or potential playoff teams like Tom's is for sure. Although the record would not indicate that at the moment. But this whole matchup, this whole week for Alex is like that Alanis Morissette song, Ironic, right? Where to me, this is like you have a week like this when you're 1-8. Like, where was this the rest of the season for Alex? I mean, you mentioned he finally gets the production from Bijan Robinson, 17 fantasy points. Finally, Arthur Smith, as you just talked about in our last matchup, he finally decides to do what people have been begging him to do, get Bijan involved. And Josh Jacobs, we already talked about the increase in production under new coach Antonio Pierce with the Raiders. So, you know, it's really unfortunate. The Kittle, man, you get 116 out of Kittle. Granted, that came on one big play, but hey, like,
it was an impressive
there are
play.
a lot of mouths to feed.
I don't know if you saw that. It was an impressive play. He really dogged the safety. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, just a lot of things here. The one question I did want to ask you, just looking at his wide receivers, it's kind of rough. It's been rough all season, especially now with T. Higgins out. You don't know if he's going to be ready for Thursday night. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver number 47. I don't know if you can look real quick at or if you even want to, because it might be strategy-wise, but not startable, probably. You might be able to find someone better on the waiver wire, maybe somebody with a little more upside. He's just not involved as much, with Sam Howell throwing, I think it was 47 times, and only getting 6 targets, 2 receptions. Not what you like to see. Do you just kind of ride it out now that you're 2-8, or like what are we doing here?
It's so hard with the Commanders. Their receivers have gone through streaks, right? Jahan Dotson was like the biggest bust of the draft, I believe, for my team. Was it this league that I was so excited about getting him? No, it must have been another league. But I was really excited about Jahan Dotson, and he sucked for like 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden, he came on and had a huge monster week this week. And it comes at the expense of Curtis Samuel. There's probably some waiver wire guys that you would start over him potentially. Yeah. Does have the Giants next week, which we just saw with the Cowboys receivers. Yeah. Not only Noah Brown,
their fourth was getting 15 points.
Noah Brown is on the Texans. But yeah, exactly. They had everybody involved except for Tony Pollard in that matchup. So I don't know. We'll see. At this point, 2-8.
I will say, talented enough roster to really steal some games from people that really need to beat Alex. He's not a pushover, as we were saying earlier in the show. A lot of parity in this league. Definitely not a pushover team that you can just look past. A lot of impressive scores, but I do look forward to Bijan Robinson getting 9 carries next week, so we can talk about that. Going over to Tom's team now, really in a free fall here. I think he started 3-1 on the season. I think he's lost, it's like 6 straight now. I actually have some audio from Tom when he was watching the end of this game and the points scored. That was the Darth Vader screaming no, as Tom was probably doing sitting in Scott's living room, watching this whole thing unfold. Really needed this game. But let's go over his roster here. Does make the right start here. We were talking about a little bit at the Wine Fest we had this weekend about him starting Stroud over Lamar. That ended up to be a good call as he scores 19 points. Probably won a little more against Cincinnati. But, does throw a touchdown, does get in the end zone on the ground, which I think is that's his second rushing touchdown of the season. Dan Montgomery comes back, 116 yards on 12 carries. You like to see that. Alexander Madison here goes out of this game with a concussion. So that is another hit to Tom's running back core, but he does have the backup waiting in the wings, so he can just plug and play that. Stephon Diggs and Deontay Adams. This is crazy. In a close matchup, that Stephon Diggs is only getting 5 targets is kind of wild and probably got the offensive coordinator fired. Now is the number 4 wide receiver, so still up there. This was his worst showing of 2023. But Deontay Adams, he gets the targets. He's not really getting in the end zone, though. He's now number 14. You'd like to see the 13 targets, which is his second most on the season. But they're still trying to figure it out there in Las Vegas with the new coaching staff. So definitely positive regression, but it might just be a little bit too late. You really couldn't have had those 5, 1, 9, 3, 6 out of your I think it was his second draft pick. Going down the board here, does start Tank Dell, which we did talk about a little bit. 6 for 14, 56 yards, and that late touchdown, I believe. And, we always talk about it each week because it's just funny. The Cowboys defense actually did a lot worse than I actually would believe they would. 5 sacks, 13 points, solid. But against the Giants, you were expecting a tiny bit more out of the Dallas defense. My question to you is, Zay Flowers, we all watched that game. We all feel that he should be more involved than he is. We all believe that Keaton Mitchell should be way more involved than he is. Is this just one of those things where it's just going to be up and down the rest of the season? Like, he's going to be featured in some games. He does have 9 points this game. Only has 1 touchdown on the season. Kind of hard to trust here. So my question to you, with Rashid Rice coming back, you're probably starting him. Zay Flowers or Tank Dell? I think I might have asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again.
Yeah. If Houston's fully healthy, it's close. Like if Nico Collins is playing, it's probably closer and matchup dependent. But any other time, if Nico is out or it maybe even in a real plus matchup, I think it's Tank Dell right now. Just the way Stroud has been playing, Dell has been electric. Clearly, he's been finding him. 14 targets for Tank Dell this past week, and Stroud is improving from week to week. So I think you got to kind of take advantage of this rocket ship that's taking off. And both of these guys are going to disappoint from time to time, but there's a reason why I don't typically draft or pick up Ravens, because I feel like the running back position and the wide receiver position is just too hit or miss and too volatile for me to trust that on a week to week basis. Yeah,
it's just crazy how talented Zay Flowers is that they're just not getting him the ball as much. He needs 10 targets a game. I mean, to be honest, Rashad Bateman is just a guy, it seems like. Odell's past his prime. He does have a nice touchdown on the day, but this is a guy you need to feature, and they're just not featuring him for whatever reason. Not good news for Tom. It's just, I don't know what else to say. It's just he went from the league scorer to now where he is today. Not looking good for Tom. Hopefully, Ty Chandler really takes off and, has really become one of those dynamic rookies that comes in and really puts up points, because if he doesn't have that, I would feel safe to say that his season is over.
Yeah, Tom, one of the better managers in the league about anticipating, picking up young talent. I think the fact that Ty Chandler played a good bit of this game, the fact that Madison is dealing with concussion, may miss a week, and if Ty Chandler looked decent in this game, he actually looked more explosive than Madison. So with their upcoming schedule at Denver, Chicago, a bye, and then the Raiders, all of those are plus matchups for running back. So you could very well see Ty Chandler being potentially a fantasy savior to some degree for Tom, as you say, in free fall here. And part of the reason a lot of these guys just haven't panned out, done what you expected of them. I mean, from Madison to Devontae Adams. Zay Flowers is a rookie, but I think you still expected a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then Lamar Jackson, it says number 5, right, in the league, but that's not on a per game basis, meaning he hasn't had his bye yet. So he's probably closer to 10 or 11 in per game basis. But 13, 11, 11, 17 points, those are all finishes in the last 5 weeks for him. He had the big 33-point game against Detroit. But other than that, Ravens win-loss aside, the fact that they can put 30 points up aside, he only gets 13 this week against Cleveland. So you're seeing an offense in the Ravens that have a lot of ways to score, and they don't always involve Lamar Jackson. And that is a little bit concerning.
And the defense isn't going to allow many shootouts. I think this is kind of an outlier. So not many opportunities for Lamar to really just put the team on his back and go out and win weeks for Tom or the Ravens. So let's go over to our next matchup here. I wonder who that's going to be. It's going to be me. All right. So now going to my team, my wonderful, wonderful team that I was not expecting to win this week. But,
The only thing I'm addicted to right now is winning.
The only thing I'm addicted right now is winning. I am 10-0 on the season. That has to be a record for the Beltway Wars Invitational. I'm not sure. Pat, you'll have to check that as the historian here.
Did you just use the same drop as last week?
You gotta keep what's working. You gotta keep what's working. So Justin Herbert here, 28 points in that shootout, like we mentioned before, 323 yards and 4 touchdowns on the day. Alvin Kamara doesn't get in the end zone, but gets a lot of usage. 9 carries, 42 yards, 7 for 7 for 33 yards. Continues to be a PPR monster. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 for 9, 156 yards and a touchdown. Probably my best draft pick probably of this past draft, I would say. Dalton Kincaid, also kind of an unsung hero here that I picked up from the waivers a couple weeks ago. 5 for 6, 51 yards and a touchdown. And Ramondre Stevenson, not flashy. 20 carries, 88 yards, but does, get the usage. 3 for 5, 14. So I do like to see that, and I do love that I got a win with all my little Dolphin friends on a bye. So 10-0, can't complain. Happy to see and hear what you think.
Yeah, this was a little bit touch and go for you. Definitely some swings this week against Josh. Point where I thought I had maybe effectively jinxed you, but I didn't quite do so. You come out with a close 5-point victory here. And Herbert, it's got to be a little bit
sigh of relief
with that, Herbert. A little sigh of relief there. 323 yards and 4 touchdowns, as we saw most of them to Keenan Allen. So really nice after a little bit of kind of weakness in his game since you picked him up from trade. He comes back with a really nice 28-point fantasy day. You resisted the temptation to go with Kyler Murray now that he's back, who did have a nice game here, 17 fantasy points, was involved on the ground as he usually is, 6 for 33 and a touchdown, but you did make the right call with Herbert. That decision may get complicated based on matchups in subsequent weeks, but that will be for you to figure out. St. Brown, yeah, my gosh, what can you say? It's surprising to me that he's only number 7, and it is because he has had his bye again for the opposite reason that we just talked about. He's probably more like 3 or 4 on a per game basis because he's not been in single digits yet this season. Double digits every week, a reliable 9 to 15 targets. I mean, just a total fixture in this Lions offense.
Would you say that he's a target god?
I would say that the sun god is becoming a bit of a target god for sure in that offense.
That's my last
Dalton Kincaid, by the way. I mean, just 5 for 6 here, but clearly they're finding him in the red zone. He scores his second touchdown on the year, 13 fantasy points here. Kincaid, look, we don't know what's going to happen when Dawson Knox comes back. He was sort of more of the tight end in favor of that offense. Again, we'll see what the change in offensive coordinator means for Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
But until proven otherwise, the guy needs to be a fixture in your fantasy lineup for sure moving forward. Not much else to note. I think Kamara doing Kamara-like things, 7 for 7 through the air. Solid from Stevenson, as you mentioned. But we should just mention, man, look at that Chargers -7 on the bench. How about that? 41 points allowed, 533 yards of offense given up to the Detroit Lions. Most of that from Amon-Ra St. Brown.
They're due.
-7.
Yeah, so I preemptively picked them up next week because of the Saints having a bye. They play Green Bay next week. I like that matchup a lot, so they will be in my starting lineup this week against Green Bay. Just something on Kincaid. I think he's way too talented to be overshadowed by Dawson Knox when he comes back. At least that's what I'm hoping. You couldn't really ask for a better fill-in terms of the Buffalo offense, being able to showcase Kincaid while Dawson Knox has been on IR. I don't see them going away from it. Maybe he gets a little dip in his snap count, but they got to keep him involved. He's their second most talented pass catcher on that team. So I'm not too concerned about it, but you never know with these things, and especially with the change in offensive coordinator. Maybe he's like, I want to go back to the old guy. But I just think that Kincaid is way too talented just to leave on the sidelines for the Bills, who are now in desperate straits at 5-5, looking to really turn things around. But let's go over to Josh here. Kind of a rough defeat here, the closest margin of Week 10.
Knockout!
So let's just start with Joe Burrow here. 29, 40, 347, 2 touchdowns. You're probably expecting a little bit more against Houston. Definitely can move the ball against them. They've been in a lot of shootout games. So you're probably expecting a little more, but does hit around his projections just by going by the desktop. Austin Eckler, 19 carries, 67 yards and a touchdown, 4 for 7, 48 yards. He's fully back. He's fully RB number 1 going forward. Maybe not number 1, but number 1 on Josh's team for sure. But let's go down to the bad things here. Thursday night, that sleeper of a game. Chuba Hubbard, 9 carries, 23 yards. Adam Thielen gets the targets, but doesn't get the efficiency here. Only 42 yards. Evan Ingram, 4 for 7, 12 yards. Just a lot of rough matchups as I was looking down here. Tyler Lockett does have a good game here, 8 for 10, 92 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Ayuk does get in the end zone. And Garrett Wilson, who is allergic to the end zone, 9 for 14, 93 yards. So a lot of positives on the squad. It's just, my biggest concern is Garrett Wilson. I mean, yes, he's going to have these games, and 13 points is a great game, but 1 or 2 touchdowns really throws him over the top, and I just don't know if that's going to happen with Zach Wilson throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, My point on Wilson last week was that he's not going to be the player we thought he'd be with Rodgers, but he's got to be at least this. He's got to be that 12 to 16 point range most weeks. He's got to be, a solid starter. Not going to be one of the best in the league like he was drafted to be, but he needs to maintain this. I'm more concerned about guys like Chuba Hubbard with 50% snap percentage for the first time, that being that low since week 5.
Right.
I'm concerned with Adam Thielen having his second game in a row of under 8 fantasy points. He hadn't done that since week 1. I'm concerned about, Evan Ingram, who this Jaguars offense, this Jaguars team that was so good earlier in the year seems to be maybe that it could be a fraud.
Yeah.
It could be one of those fraud
worse.
teams, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were limited to 3 points. So I have more concerns here about guys underperforming. Does have some nice production from the bench is something we should point out.
Mm-hmm.
Trey McBride needs to be in the starting lineup some way, somehow, whether you swap Ingram out or you start 2 tight ends. He's a guy that has been, like you mentioned with Kincaid, he's proving that he is very talented and needs to be a big part of that offense with Kyler Murray.
Also a similar role because Zach Ertz went out and then he got the opportunity and now is really taking the reins there, and you can't go back to how productive he's been. My one little thing here, just interesting. Chuba Hubbard, And look who's waiting in the wings. Our old friend Keaton Mitchell. He only got 3
Our
carries.
brand new friend. What do you mean, our old friend?
He's my
we
old
just
friend.
met him.
I know him all the way back from
Feel like
Eastern
you've known
Carolina. I used to talk with him all the time. Interesting little thing. Just some newsworthy. It says his role will grow. So I was like, he should be at least 50% snap count with Gus Edwards. I don't really see a role with Justin Hill anymore. I think that experiment is over. Keaton Mitchell, Gus Edwards. You're probably. I don't know if you can trust him over Chuba Hubbard next week. Maybe. Okay, so you got Chuba Hubbard against Dallas next week. And we got Keaton Mitchell against the Bengals on Thursday night. Who are you starting? Because there's no other viable options, really.
Good Lord. Until you see the production from Keaton Mitchell, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. I cannot see them jumping from 24% to 60%. Now, granted, he can be effective, but I don't know. And the Thursday games also kind of have this weird, I feel like over the last couple years, there have been this Thursday night curse that there's generally low scoring games or lower than you would anticipate. So I don't know, man. It's close. What are you thinking?
I don't know if I should believe John Harbaugh, but because he's been notoriously liar in the past, but he's just way too talented. We all saw that run that he did and scored a touchdown on. He needs to be on the field more than 24% of snaps. He needs to be 50% at least. That's hard. 5-5 as well. That probably plays into it a little bit. Oh man, that's such a toss-up.
It's tough.
That's such a toss-up. I'm going with the rookie. Go with Keaton Mitchell. If they don't use him, shame on us for listening. But he has such upside, and anytime he touches the ball, he could take it 80 yards. I don't think you can say the same with Chuba Hubbard. So, start Keaton Mitchell is my campaign slogan for Josh in Week 11.
Yeah, doesn't Mitchell have 2 of the longer touchdowns for the Ravens on the season? I don't think they have a passing touchdown that beats his
yards per carry, 15 and 11. What are we doing? As a frustrated Ravens fan, what are we doing? He needs the ball. So that's going to be my advice to Josh. Start Keaton Mitchell in Week 11 and just roll the dice. Because Chuba Hubbard, I feel like this is around what you're going to get against Dallas, unless he falls into the end zone, which is always a possibility. Let's go.
We should say, Chuba Hubbard's yards per carry really poor these last 3 weeks, under 4 yards per carry. Looking at these numbers a little bit closer, 4 points, 8.6 points, a lot of that's really dependent on volume more than anything instead of talent. I think I'm persuaded. I may be persuaded.
Okay.
I don't think Harbaugh can say what he said, acknowledge to the media that he doesn't know why, and maybe it was a coaching thing.
Well,
I don't think he can say that.
He's a coach. He
can't have it. He can't have it. He can't have it happen again. He basically said, without saying, "My fault. We need to get him the ball."
Right.
I think he actually blamed it a little bit on the OC. So I think you're right. Changes are coming.
All right, let's go to our next matchup here. That would be Mike and Sarah. One of the lower scoring matchups of the day, but Mike does get the win here in Week 10 as I'm looking for a drop here. I'll just do the clapping one again. I'm reusing them. I don't care. You can't tell me what to do. Josh Allen, okay. Number one, right? We're fine with that. Does have a lot of turnovers here. Last 6 games he's thrown an interception. And he lost a fumble last night. Definitely puts a little bit of a hamper on his, ceiling, I would say, just with the amount of 2 points, 4 points adds up. So you're definitely starting him. There's nothing you can do. But it's just the turnovers are a little bit of concern here. He now has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 interceptions on the season. So maybe with the new offensive coordinator that changes. Maybe he runs a little more. But just something to look out for Mike. Goes with Brian Robinson, 6 for 6 in the air, 119 yards and a touchdown, being used in the passing attack there in Washington, so interesting to see there. Mike Thomas has a significant injury. He only goes 1 for 2, 9 yards, but Mike does have reinforcements, as we've talked about all season long, with Justin Jefferson and Devin Achane coming back very soon. Christian Kirk, 6 for 11, 104 yards, and a fumble loss. Dalton Schultz in that shootout, 4 for 6, 71 yards. Etienne has a quiet game here against a tough defense, 9 carries, 35 yards, little involvement in the passing game, but does have a lot of people on bye or injured. Justin Jefferson, Devon Achane, so gonna get some really impressive firepower back shortly. Now 6-4. We talked about this, right? We were talking about how Mike just needs to survive until he gets these A+ players back. And guess what? Now they're back. So watch out, everybody. Mike is back.
Yeah, they're back all right. Or will be
I
at
played my
least
air
next
horn.
week.
I'm sorry. You're good.
Oh, okay. Didn't realize that.
You're good. Go ahead.
Sound the sirens, because Jefferson and Achane, two of the most electric playmakers in the NFL, are coming back this coming week. And you're right. We said last week that after a loss last week, moved him to 5-4. We were starting to say, Mike really needs these guys back. He really needs to just get a win and kind of stem the loss of blood here these last few weeks. And he did that.
Right.
Not a huge point total, but did just enough to escape with the win. And really, other than Bijan Robinson, you had a lack of touchdowns across the line.
Brian Robinson. You said Bijan.
Oh, sorry. Bijan. They're both B-Robs. And I should know. I think I may be collectively blocking this out. This was the trade acquisition from me.
That's fair.
For Brian Robinson. So I never in my wildest dreams would I expect to see Brian Robinson with 24 fantasy points in this offense that we said earlier. I mean, he does that on just 8 carries, right? Goes 6 for 6 through the air, which is typically the Gibson role. It was kind of a little bit of a weird, role reversal for Robinson and Gibson this week. Gibson actually was the better runner on the ground, I think. So a little bit of an interesting shakeup there. But really no touchdowns other than Brian Robinson. I mean, DJ Moore doesn't find the end zone. Christian Kirk, 6 for 11. Love to see it, but lost a fumble and didn't score. Dalton Schultz, nothing. Not in the end zone, at least. And Travis Etienne, for the first time in what feels like a long time. Actually, it's 2 straight weeks of no touchdowns for Etienne. Game script totally affected this line, 9 for 35.
He did have a receiving touchdown the last week that he played, so he did get in the end zone.
Okay. Good call.
Yeah, but I mean that was just game script. That game just got so out of their hands. It's kind of just like you're not really concerned about Etienne. I don't really think he only played 61% of snaps, which tells me that they pulled the starters when it got out of hand. So not too concerned about Travis Etienne. Anything else?
Well, I was just Mike Thomas. Did you mention? He's dealing with a significant injury. Yeah.
Yes, but like I said, Justin Jefferson fills in right that role. He's probably going to play this week.
Yeah.
And it's just cherry on top if Achane decides to practice and play this week as well. But let's go over to our second lowest score of the week. That would be Sarah with 92.90 points. Now goes to 5-5 on the season.
I pooped my pants.
That drop said, I pooped my pants, because that's what you did in week 10 here. Derek Carr goes out of this game, only gets 110 yards, no touchdowns. Really kind of submarined her week in week 10. Jerome Ford, popular waiver pickup a few weeks ago after the Nick Chubb injury, 17 carries, 107 yards. Looks good there. Kenneth Walker, not really efficient, only 3.3 yards per carry, but does get in the end zone on a long touchdown reception. Courtland Sutton, 11 targets, 53 yards, and a touchdown. So you like to see that. But then we get into some of the problems here. Jahan Dotson, as you mentioned before, 0 for 2, 0 points on the day. Chris Godwin, 4 for 6, 54 yards. Sam Laporta in that shootout. We were hoping you're getting a little more out of him. 4 for 5, 40 yards. And Drake London, as we've been talking about all show, the Falcons don't know how to use their playmakers. 3 for 4, 36 yards. And on the loss against Arizona. Let's just take a look at our bench here. Some good news, though. A.J. Brown on bye. You probably have Justin Fields coming back this week. And then the person we were all talking about, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, Devin Singletary. 30 carries, a career high, actually. 150 yards rushing and a touchdown. Are we confident now that he's going to be startable? Dameon Pierce was out of this game. I mean, are you taking the chance of starting him over Drake London next week?
It's got to be worthy of consideration, but it might be fool's gold. Look, as long as Dameon Pierce is out, absolutely in the starting lineup. Even maybe the first week that Pierce comes back, if it is next week against Arizona, which is one of the better matchups for running backs in the NFL. Even if Pierce is back, I feel like you've got to get him in there. Pierce has not ran very well this season. Singletary, granted, he was just 13 for 26 yards with a 2 yards per carry the week last week, and had just 3 yards per carry on 10 targets the week before. But this week increases that to 5, going 30 for 150. I think in that matchup against Arizona, I think he's got to be in the starting lineup, no doubt about it, for Sarah. The question is going to be, in my mind, what quarterback is in the starting lineup for her? You mentioned earlier that Derek Carr, who has been himself a backup for Sarah's team, is remaining in concussion protocol. He very well could miss this next game with Jameis Winston filling in. And we don't know yet what the deal on Justin Fields is going to be, whether he is going to miss yet another game. I don't know that we know that just yet. So it'll be interesting to see. She may have to go look for a guy like Jameis Winston in free agency on waivers to fill in here. She's kind of in a must-win. Well, not must-win. She's 5-5. She's in the thick of it, but she is going to have to get a victory here at least in the next couple weeks. Kenneth Walker, 19 for 63. That's good news. Jerome Ford, even though Kareem Hunt got some significant work, 17 for 107. He looks like one of the pickups of the year for Sarah this year on waivers. And I did mess up earlier.
Who did you just
Jerome
say?
Ford.
Oh, Jerome Ford. Okay, yep. I thought you said Kareem Hunt. Yep. I was like, huh?
Yeah, no. Well, both of those guys played very well. Kenneth Walker got a lot of the running back work on the ground there. Kareem Hunt played more toward the end of the game, for whatever that's worth. But we talked earlier in the week, I think, about having a producer to catch errors. Well, I made a pretty big error. Jahan Dotson, I said, had a big, massive, explosive game this week. It was more like explosive diarrhea is more like it. But his big games, his big games have been the last 2 weeks where he was electric. It was this week that neither Curtis Samuel nor Jahan Dotson did much of anything at all. So
you are forgiven.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Sarah's got to make a call at quarterback if both of these guys are going to be out. Who that quarterback is, if she does have to pick one up, may depend if she's going to make the playoffs or not. That may make the difference. She's got to get a win. And with these two injured quarterbacks, she's got a big decision to make here this week.
I will say, looking at the Saints, they're on a bye this week, so you do have to make an immediate decision. But let's say Derek Carr's out later than that. Atlanta, Detroit, and Carolina. So definitely plus matchups there. Might be worth a couple of bucks. Maybe to throw in a Jameis Winston would be interesting to see there. But let's go over to our final matchup of the week here, and that would be Brian versus Scott here. Let's start with Scott first of all. Scott goes now to 5-5, as many of these other teams are, with the league low in points this week, 89.02. I had a lot of audio from the Scott, the Barnett household, with Tom earlier, and I also got some audio from Scott also watching this matchup as well.
What the hell? Oh my God! No way!
such a beautiful voice Scott has. But just looking at his team here, starts Russell Wilson. It looks like he didn't have to. He had Will Levis and Gardner Minshew. Makes the right decision as he's kind of had a resurgence here. His touchdown to interception ratio is actually kind of insane. He's only thrown 4 picks on the season. I think he has like 17 touchdowns. So good on there, kind of a sneaky little quarterback play. Tony Pollard, I don't know what the heck's going on with him, and a huge win. Only gets 15 carries for 55 yards. Tyler Algier, who we talked about a little bit, just the bad week for him. Just the Atlanta offense, you never know. 9 carries, 31 yards. Next week he'll probably have 25 carries, so be hopeful for that. Amari Cooper in a bad matchup, 6 for 9, 98 yards, so good on there. Michael Pittman, 8 for 12, 84. Jerry Hopkins, 3 for 8, 27 yards. Mark Andrews doesn't really do much. Gus Edwards, touchdown dependent guy, does get in the end zone, but doesn't do much more than that. It was just kind of like a lack of touchdowns this week for Scott. It looked like, Tyler Algier doesn't get in, Cooper doesn't get in, Pittman doesn't get in, Hopkins doesn't get in, Andrews doesn't get in. Just kind of a crappy week in terms of, having players just get into the end zone to really push him over to the top.
Yeah, boy, this could have been a disastrous week for Scott. He is already the unfortunate loser that will have to be submitting his video before Thursday, ideally. Only Dustin can get away with pushing it as late as he did. We love Dustin. We love Scott. We feel for him here because this was really a rough week, and it could have been a lot worse if Russell Wilson had been benched for either Gardner Minshew or Will Levis, both guys that put under 6 points on the bench for Scott. So at least he made the right decision there. And generally, just a lot of mediocrity. I mean, Tony Pollard continues to really struggle. Nice days from the receivers Pittman and Cooper, but Hopkins really fell flat. Levis, a second week in a row of not living up to the hype that he generated from that first rookie debut for Levis this season. And then just, I don't know. I mean, like I said, not a lot to remark on here. I mean, Andrews is going to have a couple of these stinkers every year with 5 fantasy points. Gus Edwards gets a touchdown on 11 carries. That's okay volume. Again, you'd like more from a guy that you're slotting into your lineup during the bye week for a couple of these guys. But man, without Pacheco, without Kupp this week, Scott really felt the pain from that. One positive note, it's something, a storyline that we've been remarking on this podcast for a couple weeks now. Zach Charbonnet in Seattle continues to outsnap Kenneth Walker, mysteriously enough. Has a really nice game here, just 6 carries, but 44 yards. That's over 7 yards a carry for Charbonnet. So continues to kind of slowly, you're never going to get anything out of the coaching staff there in Seattle. Pete Carroll is notoriously tight-lipped about his strategy and the players that he plans to use or not use. But we're seeing week after week Charbonnet getting an increased workload. It's increasing slightly, but it is going up. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to slot him in. Who knows, with the struggles of Pollard, with Algiers kind of hit or miss, with Bijan Robinson coming on, I think there's probably an opportunity to perhaps even get Charbonnet involved before the end of the year.
Right. So, and the one, I would say the other positive note is, you have Pacheco and Kupp on bye. So, 2 of your better players are on bye. So you would have loved to steal this game, but it's just kind of like when, your first round draft pick and then someone that's been really good this year are on bye. It's just kind of like it is what it is. If you can steal one, you can steal one. But unfortunate for Scott there in week 10. Let's see. Just trying to find a nice... I'm going to play this one. I don't know if this is going to go. All right, so Brian now is one of these teams, right, that started real slow in the season and has now made a resurgence for in the Beltway Wars Invitational, kind of like The Undertaker in WWE. Ooh, spooky. So Brian here had a couple people on bye and still gets the win. Jalen Hurts, Herbert was out. Khalil Herbert was out. Devontae Smith and Travis Kelce were all on bye this week. Starts Brock Purdy, 296, 3 touchdowns. You'll take that out of your backup quarterback every single day. Javonte Williams, 21 for 79. I'm sure Brian is glad that experiment with the Denver running backfield is over with. Does get in the end zone. Demario Douglas is kind of wide receiver 1 in a really bad New England offense, but does have value as the number 1, 6 for 9, 84 yards. Kareem Hunt gets in the end zone. Not too much to talk about, I would say, other than that. Terry McLaurin has a disappointing day in a shootout. I have no idea what you're doing starting a Giants wide receiver here, but whatever. Maybe some bye week blues, but does get the win. Does go to 4-6, and is right back in the conversation for trying to snag one of these last playoff spots.
He does look poised to do that for sure. Awfully fortunate that when you've got the buys that he had this week, that his opponent Scott had a similar situation, missing some really key players. So really a nice win for Brian, able to grind it out to remain in playoff contention at 4-6. I have my concerns still because for every Javonte Williams, you've got a Breece Hall. I heard some stats today on Breece Hall that kind of shocked me. He is like one of the least productive running backs in all of the NFL. He has some big plays in a couple games that has inflated his numbers and has inflated his yards per carry on the season.
Yeah.
But generally, I mean, if you look at his yards per carry, you're like 2.2, 1.5, 3.25, 1.42, 313, 215, like in the 2s and 3s, dipping into the 1s. Like he is one of the least productive running backs. So as surprising and decent of a team as the Jets have been, Breece Hall has been a kind of a disappointment here. He's still getting the volume generally to be a start-worthy running back, but man, you've got to be just totally disappointed that he is not as explosive on a consistent basis as we hoped he would be when he came onto the scene last year.
Yeah.
Other than that, I agree with you. Not a whole lot to say. The bye situation gets good kicker and defensive scores here to help him win this one. Cade Otton at the tight end was a replacement. He didn't really do much of anything. So kind of a solidly, it's a win for Brian. That's all that matters. I agree with you. Like Brock Purdy has been really good. I mean, he's QB number 11 coming off of this 23-point fantasy game. He's got Tampa Bay next week, who is a good offense to throw on, not to run on, but they can be beat through the air. So I'm with you. I think this team is dangerous when it's fully healthy, when it's got players that are playing in the starting lineup and not on bye. He's a solid team. Last thing I'll say, just because it's another thing we've been tracking from week to week, Tajay Spears inched up to 60 on the snap percentage. We talked about how Derrick Henry really struggled in this game.
Yeah.
Again, the tough Tampa Bay defense, but did get 3.6, so not great yards per carry, but he's slowly ticking up. I agree with you what you said last week. I don't think Henry is going to get overtaken, but just something to keep on your radar.
I completely understand with that. I completely agree. That is our Week 10 recap show, but we do have something else coming up for you in just a matter of moments. We're going to have our first interview of the season with owner Brian Morgan. So stay in tune for that, and we will be back very shortly. Bye. And welcome back, everyone, to the Beltway Wars Invitational's first interview of the season for the 2023 season. On the phone with us now is Brian Morgan, head of the Timonium Thundercats, now 4-6 on the season. Brian, do you have anything to say to our league mates? Maybe some trash talk, maybe some all your teams suck? Is that mine?
What's up, guys? I wish I could say all your teams suck, but my team has been sucking a lot. But I hope yours all start to suck for the last few weeks so I can make a comeback and make the playoffs.
Well, we were talking about earlier in the podcast how you were making a little bit of a run here, so you're definitely back in the conversation. Pat, if you want to lead us off with our first question of the day.
Well, I just want to say, like, for Brian and for everybody, like, Brian now knows what it feels like to start a podcast and get asked like a really mundane question that you just don't know how to answer. Like, it happens to me every week, and I really don't like it, but Adam's going to do it regardless. So,
Well, now it's a staple.
I guess so. It's the
Consistency.
part people keep coming
Oh,
back.
like
just
my
for that.
team, consistent, 10-0. Like we're very consistent. Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Dear.
So let's talk about your team, not Adam's team. I'm sick of Adam's team. We all are at this point. But next week's interview maybe just should be Adam. And nobody can tune in. Everyone can just kind of know it exists, but not necessarily listen to it. But let's. I want to talk about Breece Hall, Brian, because he's an interesting player to me. I was just talking on the pod a little bit about some statistics I heard today that really concerned me, and I haven't looked at his numbers on the year too much. And he's the number 14 running back, but he seems to be like one of the least efficient running backs in the entire NFL. His yards per carry on the season is kind of bailed out by some big games, some big runs where he's looked explosive. But other than that, he's like consistently in like the 2 to low 3 yards per carry range, which is like far below league average, which is around 4. What have you seen from Breece Hall this year? Are you more concerned or optimistic about the rest of the year with the way the Jets have been playing? Just how have you seen his season so far?
So I actually watched a couple of Jets games, which is a little painful, but
Why would you do that to yourself?
I wanted to see if I was crazy to, keep him or try and trade him or what the deal was. So just wanted some firsthand experience watching. And he had a number of really good long plays that were called back for penalties on various players, mostly holding calls. So I take that as encouragement, as that's not going to happen every week, but even though it kind of has been. But they also just got rid of Michael Carter today. They just waived him. So I'm hoping that he gets some more third down work and maybe catches some more passes. But yeah, his yards per carry has been kind of low. I do agree.
For sure. Going back to, we all know that you've had sort of running back problems. It looks a little bit better this past couple of weeks, with Javonte Williams and Kareem Hunt always seem to find the end zone. Your thoughts on Khalil Herbert? I mean, he's been on IR. It looks like he won't return. He didn't return this week. It looks like he might be available next week. What's his role in your roster construction here? I mean, are you starting him over Kareem Hunt? Are you waiting and seeing? Or what's his role in your team, coming into, real crunch time here?
I might wait and see. As you said, Kareem Hunt just keeps finding the end zone. So that's been a nice little around 10-point flex spot every week, which has been helpful. So thanks for dropping him, by the way.
It's very true. I held on to him for so long and decided to drop him. But yeah, I agree. I think it is kind of a wait and see. But I do think he does have some like running back 2 upside, Khalil Herbert, if he can just get out of that kind of logjam that they do have there in Chicago with Foreman and Roschon Johnson. So something to keep an eye on there, I would say, for you. Could be a little diamond in the rough in the next couple weeks, points production-wise.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. I hope so. I hope he can fill in. I might rotate on matchups. We'll see. But it's going to be Breece and Javonte starting RB1 and 2, and it's just flex spot will switch out between Herbert and Hunt most likely.
Okay. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, in my opinion, how that shakes out. I think the fantasy community has assumed that Khalil Herbert will be kind of the 1A when he returns, regardless of Deontay Foreman and Roschon Johnson. 3 very talented running backs for sure. Foreman, a guy that has done this before, right? He's popped up in the middle of a season. So I just want to point out, I think everyone thinks that maybe it's going to be Herbert, but Foreman has done in his last 5 games.
But wait a minute. This is coming from a guy who has shares in Foreman and Roschon Johnson, so maybe a tiny bit, a little bias there, maybe a little wishful thinking.
It is a little bit biased, but if you look at Khalil Herbert's numbers on the season, right? He had 5 games. He was over 7 once. I'm sorry, I guess he was at 9. Okay, so he was in double digits just once in 5 games. I mean, Deontay Foreman has had a 31-point game, has had 16 and 7 and 8. So I don't know. I just don't want to. I don't think it's as assumed as people think it is that Herbert will be the guy when he returns. He could very well be, but I have a feeling that's going to be a frustrating situation. That's the most likely outcome, in my opinion. But really, the last thing I really wanted to know from you, Brian, just kind of looking at your team, as Adam said, you've been a little bit streaky this year. Looking back to your draft, or thinking back to your draft, if you're able to pull that up, I'm curious to know what kind of looking back now 10 weeks out, what do you think you did really well in the draft? Like, was there a pick or two that you were really happy with? And then if you had to have one back, looking back in hindsight, always 2020, but is there anything you would have done differently, whether it's a pick, whether it's just an overall strategy? What are your thoughts there?
That's a tough question. I'm not sure I'd really do much different with my strategy. I just probably would have not picked some of the same guys that I picked. But some of them I wasn't exactly targeting. It was kind of like they got picked up a pick or two before, and I just kind of on a whim went for somebody. I didn't really have good backup plans. But there were some guys who I actively avoided who turned out to be pretty successful this year, such as David Montgomery. That was one that I could have had. But also losing Mike Williams to season-ending injury pretty early didn't help my already thin wide receiver room.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe not taking a quarterback so early, although Jalen Hurts has been great. I don't know.
Yeah,
probably wouldn't have done too much different.
We wanted you to talk about Kelsey at 1. what was your rationale behind that, just to get that on record? I know we've heard a little bit, but
yeah. So I saw a stat that said a large percentage of teams that win leagues have Kelsey on their team. So I was just like, let's just see how this works. I've never had Kelsey before, and looking back, maybe McCaffrey would have been a better choice.
Maybe.
But
well, as long as Tay-Tay's in the room in the stadium, he seems to be doing just fine. So you're hoping for more Taylor Swift sightings, as we're all dreading them going forward, for sure. But
just my last, not a question, but just an observation. Again, another guy that I haven't really been checking in on his numbers from very often, but Devontae Smith, man, second round wide receiver. He's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's like in the 12 or so range on the draft board, but performing as the 26th best wide receiver on the season. Has really been disappointing, but maybe some signs of optimism here in recent weeks. He's had his 2 best weeks in week 8 and 9 prior to the bye than any of his 5 weeks prior. So hopefully Devontae Smith, for your sake, goes on a little bit of a run. Hopefully the point total isn't so heavily slanted in the favor of A.J. Brown. I know that's something that has surprised Adam, the fact that those two have been so distant in fantasy performances. So hopefully some sign of things to come for Devontae Smith. And I think if he is able to put together a solid second half where he's averaging 10, 12 fantasy points a game, I think you're probably looking at a playoff run here in 2023. So good luck to you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So my last question is a little bit of a, not funny, but this is kind of, I want to get your take on this. What did you see out of Tommy DeVito to warrant starting Robinson here as your third wide receiver other than Josh Downs? Because you must have saw something that no one on earth saw in terms of Tommy DeVito.
Well,
Home cooking.
This might sound ridiculous, but he caught a touchdown the week before in garbage time, so that was
okay.
Josh Downs was hurt and likely not playing very much. I'm surprised he even did play. Didn't practice all week, and that was my only other option at wide receiver. I didn't want to drop him. Didn't want to drop anybody else, so I just kind of had to throw him in there, and he ended up playing worse than Downs anyway, even on a limited snap share. So fortunately, it didn't matter last week, but yeah, he probably won't be starting very much.
So you're saying that we might see him on the waiver wire, perhaps. Maybe not that far, but just because of how deep this league goes. But yeah, hopefully won't be seeing. If we see him in the starting lineup again, something went horribly wrong with the rest of your wide receivers. I will say that for you, Brian. So I think that's the interview. Do you have anything else to say, Brian? Or maybe let's look at who you're playing next week here. Maybe you can get some trash talking in. Let's look at week 11. You are playing. You're playing Alex here.
Oh boy.
Who had a surprising win last week. Right now, the projections say you're 70%, but Alex hasn't moved people out of his bye. He does not have Bijan Robinson, or the New England defense, so you're at least avoiding Robinson for week 11. So how do you feel about the matchup? You feel confident? Or are you unsure?
I smell Alex's 9th loss coming.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
It'd be
That's strong.
a swift loss for him.
A Swift loss. Oh, he has DeAndre Swift. That's actually funny. I hope you saw. It was the Kelsey Swift and DeAndre Swift, so that's actually that's fun.
That was purposeful.
All right. Well, it was great having you on. Thank you for joining us, and we'll might circle back with you in the text thread just to see if that prediction came back to fruition here for you. But thank you for joining us, and for everyone else, we will see you next week for the Week 11 show. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.